Hello everybody, welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to go through all the changes of CIE Geography's new syllabus for AS content. First things to note down is that in the old syllabus there was a lot of complaint that there was just too much content in 1 year of study, that there wasn't enough time to learn everything in detail or develop the skills needed to do exams. So what they've tried to do in the new syllabus is essentially cut down the amount of content you have to study for AS. So you'll see that for the new syllabus, the new students actually have it pretty well. One very substantial change you can see with that thought in mind is that for topics in the old syllabus, you have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. So every topic has 4 subtopics in the old syllabus. If you look at the new syllabus on the right side, you have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then you move on straight to the next topic. Same thing here, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, then you go to the next topic. So they've cut it down from 4 subtopics, which is quite a lot of things, to just 3 subtopics. What's also changed in the new syllabus is that it gives you more detail. So previously, it gives you a broad description of what you need to study. So for example, drainage basin characteristics, you need to know about rock types. But what exact rock types you have to study, it wasn't specified. In a new syllabus, it gives you these brackets over here. As you can see, rock types, it'll give you a bracket of what you actually have to study. So instead of being left in the dark, you know, for rock types, you have to study granite, limestone, chalk, sandstone, and clay only. So these two changes make your study much more focused, saves you more time, and hopefully improves your time management at studying geography. Now for the actual content changes, let's start off with hydrology. So the main changes in hydrology for 1.1 and 1.2 is not much. All they have done for these two subtopics is that they've merged it into one big thing. So it's talking about the drainage basin over here and also the drainage basin with some hydrograph over here. Now they've just merged it into 1.1. The whole thing is about drainage basin. Everything here you've studied over here. For hydrographs, as you can see here, this thing is basically here. All these drainage basin stuff are the drainage basin stuff. Actual content changes are very minimal. So again, 1.1, the drainage basin system, not much change. 1.2, which is the 1.3 in the old syllabus, as you can see here, river channel processes and landforms, is where changes are starting to be seen. One interesting thing to note down is that, as you can see here, deposition and sedimentation specifies the Holstrom curve. In the new syllabus, it does not specify the Holstrom curve. But in my opinion, you actually do still have to study the Holstrom curve. It's something very helpful and very, very necessary, I think, for fluvial geomorphology, because it kind of explains the whole concept for you much nicer and makes it very concise. And also, it's something you can drop into your exams to help impress the examiner. So why not? It's something that can help your journey, and it's not much you have to study. So I think even though it doesn't specify the Holstrom curve anymore, you should still study the Holstrom curve in the new syllabus. Things that are actually properly removed are channel types over here. So previously you need to know about straits, braided, and meandering rivers. Now there's no mention of channel types. Obviously you still have to learn about meanders because that's a landform in itself, but for channel types themselves, you don't need to study them. Another thing that's been removed is deltas. So previously you have to learn about 3 types of deltas, which are more ocean stuff than river stuff. So to cut down the content, you have no more deltas in the new syllabus. Now moving on to 1.3, which is 1.4 in the old syllabus, human impacts or hazards. Previously, it was kind of odd because they were mentioning how humans can modify the drainage basin and then now ask about the causes of floods. So it was very oddly structured and kind of confusing. In the new syllabus, it structures causes, impacts, and management. So should be no confusion on what you have to study. One thing that they have added is physical factors and human factors of vulnerability. This means what factors cause hazards to be more severe. Why was this flood 10 times more deadly than the other flood? and it gives you the factors over here that you have to study. So beyond that, for causes and impacts, not much change. It's just this thing, and it's not a lot as well. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4 examples of factors. For management of river floods, again, very similar things. They've structured it so you have recurrence interval over here. But other than that, one thing that has changed, but is very niche, is that previously it just says you have to study hard engineering and soft engineering. So it makes it kind of like you have to describe the strategies and that's the end of it. So you're gonna describe how dams help with floods and that's all. But in A-level geography, you have to know about the extent to which they help. They might be helpful in some cases, but not helpful in other cases. And in the old syllabus, it wasn't really clear. It was just you have to know about this thing. In the new syllabus, it actually specifies the effectiveness of these things. So effectiveness. So beyond describing the strategies, you actually have to go more in depth and actually analyze to what extent that these strategies actually help. That's just a very niche thing, but it is a change regardless. One more change that's been added is emergency responses and recovery. Previously, all your management was forecast, hard engineering, and soft engineering. Now, this thing has been added, but again, it's not much. It's just aid and relief. It's a tag on, not much you have to study. Case study still remains the same. It's just one recent river flood event. Same thing here, one recent flood event. And all these things are the same. So for rivers, not much changes. Everything is still roughly the same. The main content is the same, but it's just much more structured and helps you focus your study a bit better. Moving on to atmosphere. So in the old syllabus, atmosphere was a really, really hated topic because it was just very, very dense and there was so much to it. And whatever it gives in the syllabus is also very little for the amount of content that was in the syllabus. So in the new syllabus, they tried to address that. One thing to note for the new syllabus is that candidates should have an outline understanding of the vertical structure and composition of the atmosphere. This means you need to understand or know about the tropo, strato, meso, thermo, and exospheres and their pauses, but not in depth. Just understand or be aware that they exist, essentially. So for the actual contents, 2.1 and 2.2 in the old syllabus, has been merged into 2.1. As you can see here, diurnal energy budgets and global energy budget, basically diurnal over here, global over here, and then these things are essentially the same thing that you've studied over here. There is the natural greenhouse effect that has been added, and also the relationships between atmospheric transfers and oceanic transfers. This means how winds cause currents and how currents affect the winds. But again, these changes are very minor. Natural greenhouse effects you should be aware of already from other subjects, maybe IG chemistry and stuff. So the actual amount of content you have to study, it's really not that much. For 2.2, which is 2.3 in the old syllabus, weather processes and phenomena, it's the same thing. Everything here is everything there. And you can see it's basically a copy and paste. And again, not much content that has changed. For 2.3, this is where things get much more interesting. Something that's a bit odd to me is that candidates should have an outline understanding of climate change over the past 100 million years, which goes beyond the hockey stick. So when you learn about climate change, you probably learn about the hockey stick, which is a straight line, then it starts to increase. And that's not 100 million years. 100 million years includes ice ages and stuff, which is really odd because that's really, really detailed and probably more degree level geography, but I guess it's just an outline understanding, so it's not that bad. For the actual content of 2.3, what you studied over here is basically this one sentence in the old syllabus. So when you're looking at it, the new syllabus may seem like there's so much, but in actuality, all of that is actually condensed into this one sentence over here. The evidence is basically ice cores, tree rings, fossils, the data of temperatures and carbon dioxide emissions and sea level rise and our glaciers shrinking as well. Possible causes, basically greenhouse gas emissions and some factors over here as well. And then atmospheric impacts, just a small bit at the end, which is over here. And it's just much more in detail. So don't be afraid when you're looking at the syllabus. The actual content changes is not that much. In fact, there isn't change because it's just the sentence in itself. And what's actually a benefit for you guys is that the case study, which you had to study an urban area of before, is no longer there. So no more case study for atmosphere, just climate change and these weather processes. So actually for atmosphere, you do see quite a lot of reduction, which is beneficial for people studying. Now let's move on to rocks and weathering, which is topic 3. As you can see here, previously you have 3.1 plate tectonics, and then 3.2 weathering. Now 3.1 is plate tectonics, and 3.2 is also something about tectonics. So they have split 3.1 up into 3.1 and 3.2. 3.1, you just have to study what are tectonic plates, which is basically these two sentences over here. And then 3.2 is what the processes are, which is basically looking at the seafloor spreading, subduction, fault mountains and stuff. And the actual content changes is just this one thing over here, which is the evidence of plate tectonics. Previously, you didn't need to know the evidence. Now you do. You need to know about continental drifts, jigsaw, fossils, some other things like paleomagnetism and the age of the seafloor. All these things weren't in the old syllabus per se. Now you have to know them. But other things like these, and these, they were all in the old syllabus. So actual content changes wasn't that much beyond these two things. And even with this thing, you might be like, oh, why did it add stuff for us? They actually removed the whole of weathering. So 3.2, which is weathering, which is quite a lot of things to be honest, is completely gone. As you can see here, 3.3 is mass movement hazards, which should be slow processes and human impacts. So no more weathering, this is completely removed, which is really, really good for how much we have to study, essentially. More things that are removed actually is water and sediment movement on slopes, which is rain splash, surface runoff, sheet wash and mules, completely gone from this topic as well. The only thing that has been added is that for management strategies, you had to know about pinning, netting, grading, afforestation. Now you have to know about planning restrictions and also emergency responses and recovery, which for the trade-off of removing weathering, it's actually very, very little content now that you have to study. Case study is still the one case study you have to study, although now it is more in-depth because you need to know about predictions and stuff. Other than that, a lot of changes to rocks and weathering, and very beneficial for students studying rocks and weathering because of the amount of content that has been removed. So for physical geography, rocks and weathering has a lot removed, atmosphere has some removed, and rivers hydrology had very little removed. All in all, less content you have to study, the better it is for you in your exams. Now let's move on to human geography. So human geography, as you can see here, topic 4, population migration, when previously it was 4 population and 5 migration. So they've merged population and migration into one thing. For 4.1, it's the same thing. You had to study this before, which is over here. Population structure, same thing, which is DTM and stuff. What's interesting is for population resource relationships, which is stuff about food security, overpopulation, underpopulation, and optimum populations, all of them are completely gone. So you don't have to study this thing at all. No more Malfusion theory, no more Bose-Rops theory, everything of this is gone. All you have to do is population density and stuff, and population structures, the DTM, and overpopulation. It is still useful to mention in the DTM, but you don't really have to study it specifically. What's new is that in the old syllabus, it just mentions one case study of a population policy. Now you need to know down this thing over here. The first bullet point, examples of population policies in 2 contrasting countries, so preferably a pronatal country and an antinatal country. Therefore, you need 2 case studies. But then there's one more bullet point, which is relative success of one country's attempt to manage natural increase. And therefore, in theory, you have to study 3 case studies. In actuality, you can probably merge this case study with one of the population policies above. So study one population policy more in depth and the other one more as a satisfying this one. So whilst in theory you need to do 3 case studies, you can actually get away with doing 2. Other than that, this is all that is for population. As you can see, this whole thing is removed, which is quite beneficial for time. Moving on to migration, which is now just one subtopic, which is insane. They obviously can't fit all of this into over here. So what they've done is removed internal migration entirely. So this thing over here with intra-urban, rural to urban, urban to rural, urban to urban, all of these are removed, and you're now only focusing on international migration. These things you had to learn anyways. Everything here is basically the same thing from over here. What's been added is that impacts have been much more detailed. In the previous syllabus, you only had to know about the impacts on the source and receiving areas. Now you need to know about the impacts on the source, destination, and also the migrants themselves. Other than that, you also need to know about factors influencing level of impact. This means what factors cause migration impacts to be much more greater. And logically, you can think of the more migrants there are, probably the larger impact. And obviously, it gives you all you need to study over here, not like the old syllabus. As for the case study, there is a slight change. Previously, you need to study a migration stream. So, for example, Mexico to the United States or United States to Mexico, and you need to study that stream itself and therefore the impacts on 2 countries. In the new syllabus, it's detailed specific examples of impacts of international migration on one country. So you're no longer studying a stream, you're studying the impacts of migration on one country. So as you know, the United States, for example, has migration from a lot of countries, not just Mexico, and therefore your causes, your impacts and stuff can be more broad and more national than just Mexico to the United States. Now you can look at just one country. So I honestly think it's a really improved change. So that's all for population migration. As you can see, so much things that's been cut. Now we move on to something that's quite new, which is topic 5, water resources and management. This is actually a topic from A2, which is kind of interesting. The note here is that you need to have some understanding of the drainage basin, which you would have known from studying hydrology, and you should have done that before you have done this topic in human geography. So because this is a new topic, I'll try to go through everything. So if you do know these stuff already, try to bear with me, or you can skip to the next part. Global water resources, these are just your basic stuff. Where are our water resources? How humans affect them. So the human water cycle is where humans start to modify our drainage basins and stuff, and how that affects the water cycle. Then how we use the water. Water stress and water scarcity are 2 terms that are linked but also different. Water scarcity is when you have less water than water stress. And then you need to know about how water consumption is linked to our economy. So probably the wealthier you are, the more water you consume. And then what is our use of water essentially, which is again kind of similar to up here. Now 5.2, factors influencing water resources at a regional/national scale. Factors that influence the supply of water, obviously the physical factors, which are whether the water source is next to you or not, whether you have rainfall or not. It's basically very simple. Human factors affecting resources, basically how humans add to the water resource supply. They can do desalination, they can recycle water, they can store water, they can have water delivery systems with pipes and stuff. Again, not much you have to study. For factors that influence the demand of water, it's how many people there are, how wealthy they are, the economy, what industries we're specializing in, and also some seasonal changes. Again, really similar to 5.1.3, which is kind of where you're seeing that they're kind of running out of things to say. They're just adding stuff in. 5.2.3, water security, very linked to water stress and water scarcity. Again, a bit of a repeat, but water security it's also talking about the water quality. For water stress and water scarcity, these two, it's talking about the quantity of water, so the amount of water you have, but water security also talks about the cleanness of water. Again, here it's the pattern of water, what is water security, physical factors and human factors. So stuff like acid rain, stuff like pollution, all of these things, very, very similar things. And then what that does to the people and the environment. Environment is probably less greenery because there's less trees essentially. Now we move on to the last topic, last subtopic, 5.3, management of water resources at a regional/national scale. 5.3.1, strategies to increase water resources and access to water, which is the success of streams, strategies like dams, reservoirs, blah, 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 desalination. But when you think about it, that's the same thing as up here. Storage and water transfers, that's dams, reservoirs, that's multi-purpose river schemes, that's water transfers. Salt removal, desalination, rainwater harvesting, that's water storage, gray water, that's recycling water, and technological solutions for areas without piped and clean water supplies. This is something new, but again, it's not much. So as you can see here, very similar things. It's just kind of adding on to what you already know. So the amount of content that you have to study for this water topic is not that a lot, to be honest. 5.3.2, strategies to manage the amount of water. So as you can see here, this is talking about the amount of water. This is talking about how you can manage water. You can teach people about how water is very useful and we need to conserve water. You can have water efficient systems or like sprinklers and stuff. You can try to make water more expensive so people buy less water, but obviously it's relative success, so not all these things are successful. Increasing the water probably leads to this issue over here, poverty for water access. So again, these are more relative success than just descriptions. Again, back to that effectiveness thing, it's not just descriptions, it's a relative success. 5.3.3, management of water resources. Variability in water resources, volume, quality, and impacts. Basically, water security. Challenges of managing water, rates of abstraction, salt water, blah, blah, blah. Again, it's very similar to water security. And as you can see here, this topic is very, very linked together because it's kind of building on everything. So when you're learning about water consumption, you're learning about the factors that influence demand, then you're learning about how you manage demand. So it's a lot of building onto each other. So again, the content you have to study for water is not a lot. So even though it's a new topic, don't worry. For the case study, it's a detailed specific example from one country, the challenges in managing water resources, the strategies used, and evaluation of the relative success of these strategies. So basically, these two things, but a case study, and you can basically do your case study when doing these things, and you can skip this part. So for topic 5, water resources and management, it is a new topic. It can seem frightening, but when you look at the ins and outs of it, it's not a lot, and I'm sure anyone can crush this topic because it is a bit of common sense as well. Now let's move on to topic 6. Previously, it was known as settlement dynamics because you need to know about rural settlements and also urban settlements. Now, as you can see here, topic 6 is only urban areas and management. So it is only urban areas, there's no more rural. Process of urban growth, these things are the same. Causes and consequences of urban growth, all the same. So it's been over here, which is the urban trend and stuff, and not much that has changed. What has changed is that you had to learn road cities before over here, concept of road cities, but you didn't know what primate cities was. Primate cities are cities that are way larger than other cities in the country or the region. So for example, London with 10 million population, that's way bigger than any other city or towns in England or United Kingdom. So these are examples of primate cities, and you have to know about them essentially. It's not a lot of things, it's just a concept you have to understand, which is adding on to road cities, which is probably a better trade-off for studying the whole of rural with a case study. For urban structure and change, now you are going to learn about horizontal and vertical urban structures, so tall versus wider buildings, and you also need to know about place identity and the perception of place. So what makes an area more known essentially. So you can talk about the high rises of areas or the culture of areas. For example, Paris, you can probably think about City of Love, you can think about the Eiffel Tower. That is the place identity, and the perception is that it's the City of Love. So again, it is a new concept, but it's not that challenging. And this bullet point is basically this thing merged with the central business district. But in the old syllabus, you just ended at that. You just need to know why urban activities change. In the new syllabus, you need to know the rates of change. So it's not just why they change, it's also how fast they change and also why they change faster in certain areas. Something to tag on, it's not that much as well. Zonation, this is over here as well. No change for that. Last thing over here, it's something quite different. 6.3 is sustainable urban development. Previously, it's just management of an urban settlement. Now you're going to talk about sustainability, and obviously what is sustainability and why sustainability is kind of subjective and stuff. And then you need to know about how people can balance sustainability. There's so many sustainability, there's so many stakeholder views, and how urban areas kind of try to find a balance in that. And now this is sustainability issues in urban areas. So it's how we get rid of our waste, how we can manage public and private transport, and quality of density of housing. Basically, density is probably good for sustainability, but it's like good for the individual stakeholders. It's up to debate. Role of green spaces and water features. So things about parks in cities, how beneficial are they? For 6.3.3, strategies for the sustainable management of urban areas. It's tagged on to this. So previously you learned about the solid waste disposal, transport, and housing issues. Here is the strategies to reduce these issues, and also the constraints of trying to achieve these successes, and also what are the incentives of managing them successfully. So is it happier people? Is it more money? There are more incentives to look at. Previously, in the case study, you need to learn about two case studies, a shanty town and also infrastructure provision. Now it's just one case study of an urban area, and it is sustainable management, and it's just a scheme used. So there are a lot of changes for urban areas. Obviously, these are quite similar. These have stuff added on, and this is completely new. But again, I'd say it's been a reduction of what you have to learn. Previously, you need to learn about rural settlements and you have one case study for it, and then you need two other case studies. Now you just need one case study and you don't need to study rural at all. So I'd say content-wise, it's much less you have to study. So for overview of human geography, topic 6, some changes on what you have to study, but I think overall a reduction. For topic 5, water resources, new content, but I honestly think it's the easiest topic because it's more common sense and a lot of things are building on to each other. So the amount of content is not actually that much. And for population migration, huge reduction of the amount of content you have to study. So overall, human geography seems to be the bigger time saver of your studying time for geography. You should be smashing your exams now because you have much more time to prepare your skills, study the content. So these are all the changes for AS Geography. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.